Gospel Reflections for the 27th Sunday of Ordinary Time, EFC, 5th of October 2025. The Gospel text is from Luke chapter 17, verses 5 to 10. The main focus of this Gospel reading is this: our faith has the power to do impossible things, but it needs to be increased and deepened always as it is assailed by trials and doubts. It has to be translated into faithful and disinterested service. In brief, the main theme is power of a deep-rooted faith. In today's gospel, Jesus speaks about the power that comes from faith. When the apostles requested him to increase their faith, according to chapter 17, verse 5, he answered, if they had faith of the size of a mustard seed, they could uproot even a mulberry tree and get it planted in the sea, according to verse 6. This comparison to a little seed does not refer to a small measure of faith, but great and firm faith, since speaking in opposite and exaggerated terms was common in Jesus' culture to emphasize a point. Hence, in this context, Jesus seemed to refer to the quality or depth of faith than its quantity. Jesus compared the power of faith not to a huge rock or mountain, but to the power inherent in a small and tiny seed, because a rock or mountain could neither grow nor increase, whereas if a seed were sown in the ground, it would sprout, grow, and develop into a big tree. In addition, since mulberry tree was one of the trees that had very strong roots in Palestinian milieu, Jesus compared its strength with the power of faith to tackle deep-rooted sins, habits, and problems. He wanted to give this message: anything that humanly speaking seems to be impossible becomes possible for faith, becomes possible when approached with faith. Though our faith is God's gift, we have to constantly pray that it may grow and be deepened. The reason is that it can become very shaky and weak when we are assailed by temptations, doubts, trials, suffering, unfulfilled desires and expectations, unanswered prayers, unjust treatment from others, incurable illnesses, sudden accidents, calamities, and death. That is why, as the disciples did, we should always pray humbly to the Lord that he may deepen our little faith and increase its quality, so that we are able to uproot the deeply rooted doubts of faith. What is the quality of our faith? How to enhance it? Faith is the greatest force or power we possess. The problems of life which seem to be impossible to solve, the sufferings which seem to be impossible to bear, and the tasks that seem so difficult to do become possible for a person of strong faith. It is faith that gives us patience, perseverance, determination, and endurance. Yes, faith has the power to uproot even deeply rooted sins and addictions. This truth becomes clear when we listen to the testimonies of faith given by believers who get converted from addictive habits such as alcohol and drugs, of those who get healed from their incurable illnesses, of terminally ill people who learned to accept their illnesses, or those who overcame their suicidal tendencies with the power of faith and surrender to God. Pastorally speaking, faith has three dimensions or aspects. Number one, faith observance, that includes all the religious practices, routine prayers, worship, rituals, and devotions. Number two, faith knowledge or information that is acquired by an intellectual or theoretical understanding of the truths of faith through catechism or catechetical instructions, faith-related seminars, theological courses, homilies, and spiritual conferences. And number three, faith surrender, that leads us to surrender our entire life into the hands of God by submitting ourselves to His holy will, permitting Him to do what He wants with us and take us where He wants and give us what He wants. Though the first two dimensions of faith are also important and necessary, if taken routinely or rationally, they may not help us to uproot trees, as Luke says in today's gospel, or move mountains according to Matthew and Mark. Matthew chapter 17 verse 20, Mark chapter 11 verse 23. These metaphors refer to the power of faith to uproot or overcome deep-rooted sins or bad habits and level or solve mountainous problems, very hard problems. To check how strong and deep-rooted is our faith, just go through your memory lane and find out whether in your past life there was any time when you thought you would never be able to do a difficult work or come out of a bad habit or face agonizing situation or live with an unbearable person, but later you were able to do it due to a deep trust in God and repeated acts of faith surrender. Think of many married couples who decide to stay together in spite of unbearable differences and refuse to get separated or go for divorce, or the terminally ill persons who are able to accept their illness in sheer act of surrender to God's will and their own willpower to survive. In the second part of today's gospel, Jesus described how his disciples had to put their faith into practice by rendering faithful and disinterested service without looking for any reward. He compared this type of service to the service rendered by a slave to his master. While slaves were fully under obligation to obey their master, the master in Jesus' days was under no obligation to show gratitude to them or shower rewards on them. After doing all the duties faithfully, slaves could only consider themselves worthless slaves or unworthy servants who did only what they were supposed to do, as chapter 17 verse 10 says. Jesus wants to tell us that our faith is increased when we become loyal and dutiful servants of our master. It is increased when we put into practice by serving others selflessly without expecting any rewards, appreciation, recognition, or a well-done pat on our backs. After doing a thankless or unrewarded service or living a life of faithfulness to the end, not only in terms of money but also in terms of appreciation, if somebody is able to say this, we are unworthy servants, we have done only what we ought to have done, as verse 10 says, surely it is a sign of greater and deeper faith. Faith works only when we consider ourselves unworthy of God's grace and trust solely on His grace and mercy rather than on one's merits or our own merits? Do we serve grudgingly or lovingly? Do we serve with ulterior motives or disinterestedly? A prayer. What thanks can I render to you, O Lord, for the precious gift of faith? In deep faith I surrender my life to you and pray, Lord, increase my faith in you and do what you want with me. I am yours. Amen.